Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a pretty massive topic on the table today, and I want to start by challenging a premise that we've all been hearing a lot lately.
Yeah. What's that?
You hear it all the time now, people saying search is dead or, Google is over. And honestly, my first reaction is usually to roll my eyes.
Sure. Tech pundits love a good obituary. It gets clicks.
It really does. But then I did something interesting. I actually went back and looked at my own browser history for the last, say, month or two.
What did you see? Anything surprising?
It was actually pretty shocking. I saw a lot less Google than I expected. A lot. I saw a ton of Perplexity. I saw a lot of ChatGPT. And here's the real kicker. When I do use Google now, I find myself getting annoyed.
Annoyed? How so?
I get annoyed if I have to click more than once. If it doesn't just give me the answer right there at the top in that little AI box, I feel like it's wasting my time.
That's fascinating. That feeling of friction, that impatience. That's the whole story right there.
Exactly. So what we're really talking about today is the death of the 10 blue links, that page we've all looked at for 20 years. But the big question for me is this actually a real paradigm shift? Or is it just, a fancy user interface update? Because those are two very, very different things.
It is absolutely a paradigm shift, and I don't use that phrase lightly. I promise. We are witnessing, in real time, the transition from the era of search engines to the era of answer engines.
Okay, answer engines. I hear that a lot, but it sounds a little bit like marketing jargon, doesn't it? Like a rebrand.
It sounds like it, but it's not. The underlying architecture, the actual plumbing of how our society retrieves human knowledge is being ripped out and completely replaced as we speak.
And that right there is the mission for this deep dive. Yeah. We're not just going to look at the cool new AI tools and what they can do. We're going to look at the fallout. Because if the search engine as a concept goes away, the entire economic model of the open web, it's all built on traffic, ads, and clicks, it just collapses.
It does. And we have a fantastic stack of sources today that really lets us look at this from every single angle.
Yeah, lay them out for us. What are we working with?
Okay, so first, we've got some great industry analysis on the AI search versus SEO battle. This comes from Passion Fruit and the DEV community, and it gets into the weeds on the technical shift, from keywords to context.
The nuts and bolts, I like that.
Exactly. Then we have a really pivotal interview with Matthew Prince. He's the CEO of Cloudflare, and he talks about this moment he calls Content Independence Day. It's essentially the day the data wars between publishers and AI companies went hot.
Okay, so we've got the tech and the economics. What else?
We also have some fascinating academic work. There's a mixed methods research study on German media students and their adoption of ChatGPT. It uses a model called UTUT, we'll break that down later, to figure out why and how they're really using these tools, the psychology of it all.
And the findings they're pretty counterintuitive.
They really are. And finally, my favorite piece, honestly. It's new psychological research published in the Journal of Applied Research in Memory and Cognition. And it suggests a surprising way that AI can actually help human brains learn better. It's a concept called the pre-questioning effect.
So we're going from the server room with the engineers to the boardroom with the CEOs, then into the university classroom, and finally, right into the cognitive structures of the human brain itself.
That's the journey. It's a big one.
All right, let's start at the beginning. Section 1. The Great Shift. Let's define our terms. The 10 blue links. This has been the standard for since the late 90s?
Pretty much, since Google won the search wars. And we all intuitively know how it works, right? I type a keyword, Google's crawlers look at a massive index of the internet they've built, and it serves me a ranked list of pages.
And that ranking is based on things like authority, how many other sites link to it, backlinks. That was the magic word for years.
Right. And I think the best analogy for a traditional search engine is to think of it as a massive, hyper-efficient librarian. A really, really good one.
Okay, I like that.
So you walk into this massive library and you say, I need to know about the causes of the French Revolution. Now, the librarian does not themselves know the answer. The librarian knows where the books are.
They're an index, a guide.
Precisely. So they point you to a shelf and say, check these 10 books. They're the most respected, most cited books on the topic. The answer is probably in there somewhere. Good luck.
And the key part of that is that the work, the actual synthesis, the reading, the connecting of the dots between those 10 books, that's all on me, the user.
Exactly. You are the processor in that equation. You have to open the 10 tabs, skim the articles, try to figure out which sources are reliable and which are junk, filter out all the noise, and then you construct the actual answer in your own head.
It's a very active process when you think about it.
It is. Now, let's compare that to an answer engine. We're talking about tools powered by large language models, so, GPT-4, Claude, Gemini from Google, Perplexity AI. How is the mechanic of this different? Is it just a better librarian?
Yeah, it feels like more than that.
It's not a librarian at all. It's a completely different employee. It's a research assistant, a very fast, very confident research assistant.
Okay, so what does the research assistant do?
When you ask an answer engine that same question about the French Revolution, it doesn't just look at the index. It performs a process that in the industry we call RAG. It stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation.
RAG. Okay, so it retrieves, it augments, it generates. Break that down.
Sure. It goes to that same shelf of books the librarian pointed to. That's the retrieval part. It's finding the relevant sources. But then, and this is the magic step, it actually reads all 10 books for you instantly. It pulls out the most relevant passages from each one, compares them, finds the consensus. That's the augmented part. And then it generates a brand new, unique paragraph in conversational language that directly answers your specific question.
So the work of synthesis, it's been offloaded. It's moved from the human to the machine.
Perfectly put. It's been completely offloaded. And that reduction in friction, that feeling you described of getting annoyed when you have to click, that is incredibly addictive to the human brain.
I can attest to that. It feels like a superpower at first.
It does, and the data backs this up. There was a 2025 survey referenced in one of our sources that found 68% of users, so more than two-thirds now say they prefer getting a single AI-curated response over browsing multiple websites themselves.
That number feels completely accurate to my experience. But it also, I don't know, it feels a little bit dangerous.
Oh.
Well, because when I'm the one doing the synthesis, I can see the sources. I can make a judgment call. Oh, that site looks a bit sketchy. Or this one is an academic paper. That's a primary source. I have context. When the AI does it, it's just a black box. I get a paragraph of text that sounds incredibly confident, but I have no idea how it was made.
That is the fundamental trade-off of this new era. We are trading transparency for efficiency every single time.
And our brains are wired to make that trade.
Absolutely. We are what cognitive scientists call cognitive misers. Our brains evolved to conserve energy. So if I can get a decent enough answer in 30 seconds of reading versus 15 minutes of clicking and cross-referencing, my brain and your brain is going to choose the path of least resistance almost every single time. It's just how we're built.
It's what the passion fruit article called the vibe shift. It's not a technological preference, it's a psychological one. Users don't want options anymore, they want answers.
The friction of clicking and waiting for a page to load and then reading, it's starting to feel like work, unnecessary work.
And this shift in user behavior is forcing a shift in how we even talk to the machine. I've noticed this myself. We aren't just typing keywords anymore.
No, we're finally stopping the robot talking. You know exactly what I mean. For 20 years, we have been trained to speak Googleese.
Oh, 100%. Best Italian restaurant, NYC cheap. Or, iPhone 16 rumors. No verbs, no connecting words, just a string of nouns and adjectives.
Because that is not how humans speak. That is how databases speak. We were translating our human thoughts into a language the machine could understand.
I still do it. It's such a hard habit to break. I catch myself doing it all the time.
It is, but the answer engines are actively training us out of it because they don't need it. They actually work better with natural language. They want the context.
So instead of best electric cars 2025 price,
yeah,
I can just ask.
You can ask, I'm looking for a quiet Italian place in the West Village for a first date, under $100 that also happens to have good gluten-free options for my partner.
And a traditional search engine would just completely choke on that query.
It would be a disaster. It would probably just latch onto the words gluten-free and Italian and give you a random list of pizzerias in Queens. It would ignore all the nuance.
Because it's just matching keywords.
Exactly. But an LLM understands the semantic relationship. It understands the connection between first date and the concept of quiet or ambiance. It knows that under $100 is a mathematical constraint. It treats your query as a conversational prompt, not as a database lookup. It understands intent.
Okay, so if the user behavior is changing this dramatically and the underlying technology is completely different, then it stands to reason that the survival strategy for anyone who, publishes content on the internet has to change too.
It has to, or you become invisible.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, survival of the fittest. Or maybe survival of the most adaptable. We used to talk obsessively about SEO, search engine optimization. Now the new acronym is AEO, answer engine optimization.
It's the inevitable evolution. But I really want to be clear on this point. AEO isn't just SEO, but for robots. It's not a simple rebrand. It requires a completely different philosophical approach to how you create and structure content.
How so? If I'm a marketer, a content creator, a blogger,
Yeah.
what am I actually doing differently day to day? What does this look like in practice?
Okay, the biggest mental shift is this. In the world of traditional SEO, the single metric that mattered more than anything was visibility.
Right, being ranked #1. That was the holy grail.
You wanted to be at the top of the list. You wanted to get the click. That was the whole game. In AEO, the metric that matters most is credibility.
You don't want to be seen. You want to be believed.
More than that, you want to be cited.
Citations are the new backlinks. I saw that phrase repeated across our sources, and it really stuck with me. But explain the mechanics of that. How does an LLM decide to cite my article over someone else's? It's not like it's counting hyperlinks the way Google's PageRank algorithm did.
No, it's not. It's a much more abstract process. LLMs rely heavily on a concept that we call entity authority. Now, this gets a little bit technical, but it is absolutely crucial to understand.
Let's get into it.
The web is moving away from being a collection of documents made of strings of text, and it's becoming what we call a knowledge graph. The AI's goal is to understand that you, your brand, your name, your podcast, are a specific entity in the world, and that this entity has a certain level of expertise and trustworthiness in a specific field.
So it's not just about having the words deep dive on our website a bunch of times.
Not at all.
It's about the AI understanding that the deep dive is an entity, that it's a podcast, that it's hosted by us, that it discusses news and research, all those relationships.
Exactly. And you don't just hope the AI figures that out. You have to explicitly tell it. And you achieve that through things like schema markup and structured data.
So this is code you're adding to your website, basically.
Yes, you're literally coding your site to tell the AI in a language it understands, here's the question this article answers, here's the direct answer, here's the author of that answer, here are their credentials. You use things like JSON-LD tags to define all of these relationships explicitly.
It sounds like you're spoon-feeding the machine.
You are, because if you leave it up to the AI to guess or infer, it might just ignore you in favor of a source that's easier to parse. If you spoon-feed it perfectly structured data, you dramatically increase your chances of being the source it pulls from for its answer.
That reminds me of another one of the tactical fixes mentioned in the Passion Fruit article, this idea of answer-first formatting. It really feels like we're being forced to rewrite the entire web to be machine-readable first and human-readable second.
That's a cynical way to view it, but it's not entirely wrong. Let me give you a concrete example. Think about a recipe blog. We all have that experience of scrolling through a huge, long intro story.
Oh, the worst. Story about the grandmother's farm in the Italian countryside in the autumn and the smell of the rosemary.
And you're just screaming at your phone, just give me the ingredients, how much flour do I need?
Right.
Humans hate that fluff. Well, AI really hates that fluff. It views it as noise. It makes it harder to extract the core information. Answer-first formatting means you put the core data, the ingredients, the step-by-step instructions, the direct answer to the user's query right at the very top.
But no preamble.
No preamble. You use clear headings, you use bullet points, you use tables, you present data, you strip away the nuance and the flowery prose because the machine isn't there to admire your writing style. It's there to extract a fact.
But doesn't that make writing incredibly boring? If every single article on the internet is formatted like a technical manual, don't we lose the art?
Yeah.
The voice, the storytelling.
We absolutely risk it. It's a real danger. The counter-argument, though, is that you are actually respecting the user's intent. If the user's query is, how do I fix a leaky faucet?
Yeah.
They don't want a story. They want a manual. AEO is a system that rewards being a really, really good manual.
So on top of structured data and answer-first formatting, we have to become very literal, very direct.
And very consistent. This gets back to entity optimization.
Yeah.
You need to use the exact same name and terminology for your brand across the entire web.
What do you mean?
Well, let's say you're the deep dive on your website, but on Twitter, your handle is Deep Dive Pod, and on your YouTube channel, it's called The Deep Dive Show.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
To a human, that's all obviously the same thing, but to an LLM trying to build a knowledge graph, it might treat those as three separate competing entities. You're fragmenting your own brand. You're diluting your authority in the machine's eyes. Consistency is key.
That makes a lot of sense. It's really just basic branding 101, but you're applying it to a neural network instead of a human consumer. Okay, so this all leads to the big scary question. Let's talk about the metrics. Because if I'm optimizing to be cited in an AI answer, I'm probably getting a lot less traffic to my actual website, right?
Almost certainly. This is the reality of the zero-click future we're walking into.
Zero click.
The goal is no longer to get the user to click a link and come to your site. The goal is to get your brand, your information, into the user's head via the AI's summary. So your key metrics have to change. You stop tracking things like impressions and rank, and you have to start trying to track things like AI citations or AI share of voice.
But you can't pay the bills with share of voice. You can't show ads to a user who never visits your website. You can't sell a subscription to someone who doesn't know you exist outside of a footnote in a ChatGPT answer.
And there is the rub. That is the fundamental multi-trillion-dollar economic crisis we are stumbling into. If the answer engine satisfies the user, the publisher starves. There's no two ways about it.
Which is the perfect segue to our next section. This isn't a theoretical problem anymore, it's a war. The war between the publishers and the bots. And according to our sources, this war didn't just start. It went hot in July of 2025.
Yes, and this is where that Matthew Prince interview becomes so critical. It's one of the most significant pieces in our research stack because it gives us a specific date, a specific location, and a specific action that changed the game.
Content Independence Day, July 1st, 2025.
It does have a very dramatic ring to it, doesn't it? But Prince argues it was an absolutely necessary, almost desperate pivot. To understand why, you have to look at the landscape in early 2025.
Paint the picture for us.
Publishers everywhere, from the New York Times down to the smallest niche blogger, we're seeing their referral traffic from search just fall off a cliff. We're talking drops of 30, 40, sometimes even 50% month over month.
And this was because Google's AI overviews and other scrapers were just taking their content, right?
Effectively, yes. They were being scraped to death. The AI models were crawling their sites, ingesting their articles, and then paraphrasing them directly on the search results page. The user got the answer without ever needing to click the link.
The value was being extracted, but none of it was flowing back to the creator.
Exactly. And the standard tool that publishers had used for decades to control this, a little text file on your server called robots.txt that basically tells bots, please stay away, well, it was being ignored.
How can they just ignore it?
It's a voluntary system. It's based on the honor code, really. And some of the more aggressive AI companies were either bypassing it or making a legal argument that fair use allowed them to scrape anything on the open web for training purposes, regardless of what robots.txt said.
So the publishers were powerless.
Individually, yes, they needed collective bargaining power.
Yeah.
So Cloudflare steps in. And for anyone who doesn't know, Cloudflare is a massive piece of internet infrastructure. They're a content delivery network. They sit in front of a huge percentage of the web to stop cyber attacks and speed up websites.
They're like the security guards and traffic cops for millions of websites.
A perfect analogy. And so what did they do? Matthew Prince describes it as a cinematic moment, pressing a red button at their headquarters in One World Trade Center. Obviously, that's a metaphor, but the technical action was sweeping and immediate.
What was the action?
Cloudflare turned on a new feature for all of its customers, a feature that blocked known AI scrapers and crawlers by default.
Whoa. So instead of every small blogger having to figure out how to identify and block dozens of different bots on their own.
Which is a technical nightmare, by the way.
Right. Instead of that, Cloudflare just built a giant wall around millions of sites all at once. It was a collective defense.
Exactly. It was an act of digital solidarity. And suddenly, overnight, the fire hose of fresh, high-quality human data that the AI companies have been drinking from, it didn't stop completely, but it slowed to a trickle.
And this is where the power dynamic, the leverage, finally shifted back a little bit. Because AI models are incredibly hungry, they need a constant diet of fresh tokens.
They need what information theorists call high-entropy data, new information, unpredictable information. Prince made a really, really important point in that interview. He said that after that July 1st cutoff, AI models that were only trained on data from before that date started to plateau.
They stopped getting smarter.
They stopped getting smarter about the present. If you ask a model about the 2024 Super Bowl, it knows everything. It's been trained on millions of articles about it. But if you ask it about a football game that happened last night, and it can't scrape the news sites, it's functionally useless. It has no idea what happened.
So the publishers finally had a bargaining chip. The chip was the present moment. It was, you want our data, you have to pay for it.
Which brings us to the three futures of the internet that Prince outlined in his talk. And I think we really need to break these down one by one because they represent three profoundly different versions of what the internet could become.
Okay, let's do it. Future number 1, the death of original content. This is the doomsday scenario.
This is the bleakest timeline. I call it the Ouroboros scenario, the snake eating its own tail.
Okay, that's a vivid image. What does that look like?
In this future, the AI companies win the scraping war. They take everything. As a result, publishers go bankrupt. They have no traffic, no ad revenue, no subscriptions. They stop writing. They shut down.
So the source of new human knowledge dries up.
It dries up completely, but the AI still needs to train. So what does it do? It starts training on its own output. AI models start scraping other AI models.
And we know from multiple research papers that model collapse is a very real, very terrifying thing. If you train an AI model on purely synthetic AI-generated data, it eventually goes insane.
It degrades incredibly rapidly. The variance, the creativity, the connection to reality, it all disappears. Everything becomes this beige, statistically average, hallucinatory sludge. So in this future, the internet effectively dies as a creative and informational engine. It just becomes a funhouse mirror reflecting itself.
Okay, that's deeply unsettling. Let's move on. Future number 2, AI becomes the publisher.
This is the vertical integration model. The AI companies, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and others, realize they need a steady supply of high-quality data. So instead of trying to license it, they just buy the sources.
So OpenAI buys the New York Times. Google starts its own global news organization and hires thousands of journalists.
Or, as Prince mentioned, maybe they buy up huge data and analysis entities like Gartner or Nielsen or Bloomberg. They own the data from creation to synthesis.
What's the risk there? I mean, at least new information is still being created.
The risk is what Prince calls extreme siloing. Imagine a future where we have a conservative AI, let's say, that owns and is exclusively trained on data from Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, and then you have a liberal AI that owns and is trained on data from CNN and the New York Times.
Wow. We would completely lose any semblance of a shared reality on the web. You'd be living in a completely different epistemic bubble depending on which chatbot you subscribe to.
Exactly. It would be the definitive end of the open, democratized web we've known. It would be a return to the era of walled gardens, like AOL in the 90s, but on a scale we can't even imagine.
Okay, so that's also pretty dystopian. So hopefully we land on future number 3, the payment model, the hybrid.
This is the optimistic view. And Prince suggests that this is the direction things are already starting to move. The AI companies, realizing they can't afford to let the publishers die, and they also can't afford to replicate the entire internet's worth of content themselves, they start cutting checks.
And we are seeing this happen, right? The deals with Reddit, with Axel Springer, News Corp.
All of those. The internet starts to transition into a massive licensing economy. If you produce valuable, unique data, you get paid by the AI companies for the right to train their models on it.
Okay, that sounds much better. But, and I feel like there's a big but coming, what counts as valuable data.
And that is the huge, huge but. This model only works for premium data, for scarce data. If your business model is just rewriting press releases or creating generic listicles, nobody is going to pay you for that. The AI can already do that better and faster.
So the value shifts entirely away from commodity information.
Entirely. It shifts to what Prince calls the sushi in Park City example.
I love this example. It was such a clear, brilliant way of explaining this.
It's fantastic. So Matthew Prince, in addition to being CEO of Cloudflare, happens to own the local newspaper in Park City, Utah. It's called the Park Record.
Right.
And he points out that if you ask an AI what happened in the Middle East today, it can synthesize a pretty good answer from 1,000 different global news sources. That information is a commodity. It's abundant. But if you ask the AI, what is the best new sushi place that just opened in Park City, or why is the city council digging up Main Street this week, the AI has nothing. It has no training data.
Unless it has access to the latest issue of the Park Record.
Exactly. That local, on-the-ground, human-observed information is unique. It's scarce. It cannot be hallucinated. It cannot be aggregated from other aggregators. It has to be witnessed and reported by a human being who is physically there.
So in a strange, ironic twist, the AI revolution might actually be the thing that saves local journalism.
It could be. Because local news is one of the few things the AI can't fake. In an information economy of near infinite abundance, scarcity is the only thing that retains value. Global news is abundant. Hyperlocal news is scarce.
So the advice for creators, for publishers, is don't try to be general.
Be specific. Be local. Be weird. Be niche. Be the only source for something that no one else has. That's where the value is now.
Be weird. I like that as a business strategy. So we've covered the infrastructure, we've covered the economy, but there is another massive group of people who are adapting to this shift, and honestly, they are doing it way faster than the publishers or the marketers.
They're talking about the students.
I'm talking about the users, and we have a really fascinating study here to dig into. It's by Mohammed Mafizul Islam, and it looks at media students in Germany. I think this study is so important because students are almost always the canaries in the coal mine for new technology adoption. How they use it today is how we'll all be using it in 5 years.
The term cyborg student really comes to mind here. These are digital natives who have never known a world without this kind of tool.
So the study used a framework called the Utah UT Total. Can you break that down for us quickly? What does that actually measure?
Sure. UTOT stands for the Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology. It's basically a standardized academic framework that researchers use to figure out why people decide to use a new piece of tech.
So it's like a formula for adoption.
In a way, yeah. It looks at a few key factors. There's performance expectancy, which is just, does this thing help me do my job better or faster? There's effort expectancy, which is it easy to use or is it a pain? Then you have things like social influence, is everyone else using it? And hedonic motivation. Is it fun to use?
Okay, so they applied this model to students using ChatGPT. What was the #1 factor driving adoption? What was the biggest predictor of use?
It wasn't even close. Performance expectancy. Plain and simple, students are, at their core, rational actors. They perceive that ChatGPT makes them faster, helps them overcome writer's block, helps them generate initial ideas, and assists with things like coding.
So they're not just using it because it's new and cool. They're using it because they genuinely believe it gives them an edge. It improves their performance.
It's a productivity tool, first and foremost. But here's where the study gets really interesting. It found something deeply contradictory about how they feel about that tool. They've discovered what they call the trust paradox.
The trust paradox. This is the most psychological part of our deep dive.
It really is. The study found a very strong presence of what's known as the Eliza effect.
Okay, you've got to explain that one. Who's Eliza?
Eliza was one of the very first chatbots created way back in 1966 by Joseph Weizenbaum at MIT. It was designed to mimic a Rogerian psychotherapist.
A therapist bot in the 60s? This is amazing.
It was incredibly simple by today's standards. It just used basic pattern matching to mirror back what you said. If you typed, "I'm sad about my mother," it would respond, "Tell me more about your mother." And yet, people poured their hearts out to it. His own secretary asked him to leave the room so she could have a private conversation with the program.
Wow. So they projected humanity onto the code.
They projected intelligence, empathy, and understanding onto simple code. And we are seeing that today with GPT-4, but on a much more powerful scale. The study showed that 50% of the students felt the AI sounded like a human or had some kind of emotional resonance. One student even said, and this is a direct quote, "It touches me emotionally."
Which is just, it's wild. We know logically that it's a statistical prediction engine, just guessing the next most likely word. But it feels like a person.
It feels like a person. However, and here's the paradox, despite that feeling of emotional connection, 53% of those same students explicitly stated that they do not trust the information it gives them.
Wait, what? So they feel like it's their friend, but they also know their friend is a pathological liar.
Or, at the very least, a world-class bullshitter. They are terrified of hallucinations. The study showed that hallucinations, the AI just making things up, were the single biggest source of dissatisfaction with the tool.
Okay, so how does that paradox resolve itself in their behavior? If you don't trust the tool, why would you use it for your schoolwork?
This is the key insight. You use it for the form, not for the content.
What's the difference?
You use it to help you structure the essay. You use it to generate the outline. You use it to rephrase a clumsy sentence. You use it to fix the syntax in your line of code. But then, and this is the crucial behavior, you go to Google or your university library to manually verify all the facts.
So they're sandwiching the AI. They might start with AI for brainstorming. They do the core research and writing themselves. And then maybe they use AI again at the end to polish and proofread. But that verification layer in the middle is still human.
Exactly. The study found that about 40% of the students said they use it purely for idea generation and then verify everything else from trusted sources. And this tells me something important. The cyborg student isn't just a mindless drone copy-pasting what the AI says. They're actually engaging in a fairly sophisticated cognitive workflow of generation, verification, and integration.
That's a more optimistic take than I expected. But there was another finding in that study that I found, well, a little more concerning, and that was their attitude toward privacy.
Ah, yes, the profound lack of concern.
Right. You would think, with all the news about surveillance capitalism and data harvesting, that students would be really worried about OpenAI or Google reading their private essays or tracking all of their queries.
You would think.
Yeah.
But the study found that perceived risk was not a significant barrier to adoption at all. For the most part, they just didn't care about the data privacy aspect. What they cared about was something different: epistemic trust.
Okay, explain that distinction for us. Data privacy versus epistemic trust.
Data privacy is the question. Are they stealing my personal information? Epistemic trust is the question. Is the information this thing is telling me true? The students are far more worried about being academically wrong, that's the epistemic risk, than they are about being tracked, which is the privacy risk.
Wow. That is a very pragmatic, if slightly dystopian trade-off. It's like saying, I don't care if you spy on me, just as long as you help me get an A.
That is precisely the calculation being made. And the other overwhelming factor, which is related, was simply availability. The Utah U2 model usually calls this price value, but since ChatGPT is free, the researchers reinterpreted it. The sheer fact that it is free, it is available $247, and it is on their phone, makes it the default starting point for any task.
It reminds me of a theory in information science, Zipf's principle of least effort.
Hold on.
The theory states that we, as humans, will almost always choose the information source that is easiest to reach, not necessarily the source that is the best or most accurate. ChatGPT is now the easiest source to reach in human history.
It's zero-effort information retrieval. So what we have is a generation of students who are fundamentally skeptical of the truth of what they're being told, but they're completely addicted to the convenience of how they get it. That feels like a very fragile state of affairs for the future of knowledge.
It does. But let's pivot now to our final source, which offers a surprisingly positive and maybe even powerful way to use this exact technology. We spent this whole time talking about AI answering our questions. What happens when we turn the tables and have the AI ask us the questions?
This is the research from the Journal of Applied Research in Memory and Cognition. And I have to say, this is my favorite part of the whole stack today, because it completely flips the tool on its head.
The concept is called the pre-questioning effect. I'll be honest, I had never heard of this specific term before, but evidently it's a well-established thing in cognitive science.
It is. It's been studied for decades. And the basic idea is incredibly simple, but powerful. If I ask you a question about a topic before you've learned about it, you will learn and retain that information much better when you finally do study it.
Even if I have no idea what the answer is and I get it completely wrong.
Especially if you get it wrong. The act of trying and failing is the magic ingredient. Let's say I'm about to teach you how an anti-lock braking system in a car works. Before I give you the textbook, I ask you, how does an ABS prevent a car's wheels from skidding on ice?
I have no clue. I'd just guess.
It's
Something about pumping the brakes.
exactly. You guess. You struggle to retrieve information that isn't there. You fail. But that struggle, that retrieval attempt, it primes your brain for learning. It opens up what psychologists call a schema or a mental slot in your mind. It essentially sends a signal to your hippocampus that says, hey, this specific piece of information is coming soon and it's important. Pay attention and get ready to store it.
So when I actually start reading the text about brakes 5 minutes later, my brain isn't just passively absorbing text, it's actively hunting for the answer to that specific question I just failed to answer.
Precisely. It creates a knowledge gap that your brain is now desperate to close. It turns passive reading into an active hunt for information. We know unequivocally that this leads to deeper encoding and better long-term memory.
Okay, so pre-questioning works. It's a proven technique. What's the bottleneck? Why don't we do this all the time for everything we want to learn?
Because it's actually really hard to do for yourself. Think about it. You can't write good, specific questions about a chapter you haven't read yet. You don't know what you don't know. All textbooks sometimes have questions at the end of the chapter. They rarely have them at the beginning, where they would be most effective.
And this is where the AI comes in, as a limitless, personalized tutor.
The study tested this exact premise. They took a group of participants and gave them a dense, technical encyclopedic passage about automobile braking systems to learn. They split them into 3 groups.
Okay, what were the groups?
Group A, as a warm-up, just read a simple summary outline of the text first. Group B was the control group. They just went straight to reading the main text. But Group C, before they read anything, had to try and answer a series of AI-generated practice questions about braking systems.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Group C crushed it on the final test.
They absolutely did. Group C scored significantly higher on the final comprehension and retention test than both of the other groups. But here's the really, really important finding from the study.
What's that?
Afterwards, they showed the participants a mix of questions, some written by a human expert on automotive engineering, and some written by the AI. And the participants could not distinguish between them. They rated the AI questions as being just as high quality and useful as the human expert questions.
That is the game changer. Because generating high-quality test questions used to be a difficult, time-consuming skill that required a professor or a teacher. Now, it's a zero marginal cost commodity that anyone can generate in seconds.
Exactly. You can take a dense academic paper or a complex report for work, paste it into an LLM, and give it a simple prompt. Do not summarize this for me. Instead, act as a tutor and generate 10 difficult conceptual questions based on this text that will test my understanding. And in 10 seconds, you have a personalized pre-questioning tool that primes your brain to absorb that material faster and remember it longer.
This completely flips the dominant narrative of AI is making us stupid. We usually worry that if the AI summarizes everything for us, our own cognitive muscles for reading and synthesis will atrophy.
Right.
But this is using AI to create what learning scientists like Robert Bjork call a desirable difficulty.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought him up. His research is foundational here. Learning should feel hard. If it's too easy and fictionless, you don't actually form strong memories. Summaries make learning too easy. Pre-questioning intentionally creates friction. It makes you struggle. And that struggle is what cements the knowledge in your brain.
So the smartest cyborg student isn't the one asking the AI to write the essay for them. It's the one asking the AI to write the quiz for them.
That is the winning strategy, 100%. Use the AI to coach you, not to replace you.
Okay, so let's try to pull all of this together. Let's synthesize this deep dive. We've gone from the macro level, the death of search, the economic wars between billion-dollar companies, all the way down to the micro level, the firing of individual synapses in a student's brain. What is the through line connecting all of this?
I think the through line is that the middleman of information is changing. For the last 25 years, the middleman was a sorter, an indexer. Google's job was to sort the 10 blue links.
A librarian.
The librarian. Now, the middleman is a synthesizer, a processor. Its job is to process all the links for you and give you the finished product.
And that fundamental change in the middleman's job description changes the incentives for every single person in the ecosystem.
It forces a hybrid approach across the board. If you're a marketer, you need a hybrid strategy of old-school SEO for technical visibility so the bots can find you, and new-school AEO for entity authority so the bots will trust you. You can't just game the keywords anymore. You actually have to be a credible source.
And if you're a publisher, you need a hybrid business model. You have to protect your intellectual property with technical barriers, like what Cloudflare did, but you also have to lean into producing the one thing the AI can't generate. On the ground. Unique, scarce human reality, the Park City sushi factor.
And finally, if you're a learner, a student, an employee, anyone, you need to develop a hybrid brain, a hybrid workflow. You use the AI for speed, for structure, for brainstorming, and for creating those desirable difficulties like pre-questioning. But you must reserve the right to verify. You keep the final act of critical thinking and true synthesis for yourself.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, something to chew on. It's about that synthesis part. We talked about how answer engines, by their very nature, crave consensus. They are designed to give you the most likely, the most cited, the most statistically probable answer.
The probabilistic answer, yes.
Right. But all of human history, all of scientific progress, is filled with monumental ideas that were, at the time, absolutely not the consensus. Germ theory was laughed at by the medical establishment. The idea of a heliocentric solar system was actual heresy.
Good point.
If we had an answer engine in the year 1600 and we asked it, what is the center of the universe? What would it have said?
It would have said the Earth. And it would have confidently cited 10,000 books from the world's greatest thinkers to prove it was right.
That is the danger of optimizing our entire information ecosystem for credibility, when credibility is defined only by the number of existing citations. We risk creating a massive, planetary-scale feedback loop of established wisdom, We might be building a machine that is incredible at summarizing what we already know, but terrible at surfacing the radical, weird, incorrect-sounding outlier ideas that actually turn out to be the future.
So the incredible efficiency of the answer engine might come at the direct cost of serendipity.
The 10th blue link. You know that weird, obscure blog that used to show up on page 2 of Google that had a crazy idea you'd never seen before? We might never see that link again in a world of AI summaries. It'll get averaged out.
That's a sobering thought. That is the risk. So I guess my final advice is this. Use the answer engine. It's a miracle tool, and you should absolutely use it. But every once in a while, click the link, go to the source, read the weird blog.
And go eat the sushi yourself. Don't just take the bot's word for it. That wraps up this deep dive. A huge thank you to all the listeners who requested we tackle this topic. We hope this helps you navigate this massive shift from search to answer.
Keep asking questions, both of the machine and of yourself.
We'll see you on the next one.